Dominic's Media. Welcome in to the David L. Gray Show, off code Unscripted on Saints. Dominic's Media, glad to have you here for this wonderful show that I think is going to be impactful. It's going to be exciting, and it's going to give you something to think about. So, I caught a video where Father Chad Ripperger was on the Jesse Romero and the Terry Barber show, talking about it's his opinion that Catholics have a moral obligation to vote. But he says that's what the church teaches, and he says that's what Thomas Aquinas teaches. Neither of those things are true, but I understand why people say them. So I'm going to get into what the Catholic Church actually teaches about a duty to vote. What's the context there? And we're also going to talk about St. Thomas Aquinas and his, when he was talking about the principle of double effect. What Thomas Aquinas meant, is it applicable to the system of democratic voting today? What's its limitations? So we're going to get into both of those things. But also towards the end of the video, I noticed that Father Chad Ripperger, when Jesse Romero had asked him a question from a viewer about these things that are called Masonic deliverance prayers and some sort of technical question and things like that. Now, I've already made 2 videos about my opposition to Masonic deliverance prayers. I'll link both of those in the comment box in the description below. So my position to those are well documented, detailed videos as to why. So I would go there if you want to understand why I think Masonic deliverance prayers can be harmful to your soul, not helpful, and what actually you need to do if there's something going on there with you sense some sort of Masonic influence in your life. What did Jesus say the remedy is for that? All right, so I'll link both of those videos in the description box and in the comment box. But what I want to talk about in this video is something people have wanted me to talk about more in detail for a while. That's this thing called generational curses and ancestral curses or something like that. So I'm going to get into what the church teaches, what scripture teaches, and what actually you need to do, what the church teaches you need to do if there's some sort of effect there. So that's the video today. That's what I'm talking about today. And I know there's a lot of emotion about this. I know there's a lot of emotion around this topic. I think I looked over here and before we started the show, and I think I noticed just from the outset, I have just 66% approval of this video without even really saying a word. Just from the thumbnail, just from the description, people are like, David, I don't like what you're going to be cooking on this show. I don't want whatever you have on the menu. I'm not eating, right? So, and I get that. But this is not some sort of attack video. It's really not. This is just, and I know some of you, dear sweet Catholic ladies in the church, I know you're very protective of your priest. Understand that. You're very protective of your priest. And some of you even call them holy. You need to stop calling people who have not passed their final judgment holy, first of all. If they haven't passed their final judgment, don't call people holy. I remember you when you were calling Father John Crappie holy. I remember you calling Father James Jackson from the FSSP holy. I remember that. Stop calling people holy just because they're wearing a cassock and they're saying what you want them to say. They tickle your ears. Stop calling them holy. Calm down on that, please. But this is not an attack video. This is really just a critique on 2 particular points that Father Chad Ripperger says quite often. Okay, so this is just a one-off. These are things that he teaches, and we talked about this before, the Masonic deliverance prayers. But and I also understand that Father Chad Ripperger is a Rad Trad Inc. Let me emphasize Inc. because I'm not talking about just radical traditionalists. Rad Trad Inc. favorite. And so I know that um, you guys know about my critiques of the Rad Trad Inc. movement. So you may be linking the two. So you may be thinking, well, this is my usual line of attack. No, this is just a critique of two particular points. One on the voting, that's actually not church teaching. It's not what Thomas Aquinas taught. It's a critique on that argument. And it's a critique of the argument on the Masonic deliverance prayer. So, but yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of emotion about this. I just want to get into, some of the comments just to demonstrate, I think, some of the irrationality that people would tend to have even before they hear a person out. And I think that's very problematic. All right. One person, RT, says, I wonder if you really were a Freemason because I have lots of family members who are, and we know the truth of the higher grades. That's an interesting comment because there's no such thing as higher grades in Freemasonry. So that's kind of odd. Right? There's two things when people don't have a clue about Freemasonry. The first thing they do, they say Freemasonic. First clue. There's no such word as Freemasonic. Father Chad Ripperger says that in his video here on the Terry and Jesse show. We'll get into that. And higher grades, the highest degree of Freemasonry, proper Freemasonry, is the third degree. Outside of that, it's really just more light. Um, that's the proper name because there's no matriculation up any tree of Masonic degrees. In particular, houses there could be. In the Scottish Rite, you could go up to the 33rd. In the York Rite, there are particular houses. Where you can, in each house, you can go up in degrees. That changes throughout the globe. Those things are structured differently throughout the world, right? There's allied Masonic degrees, and maybe in each degree set or house, you can matriculate up. But it's more, I would say it's more vertical than horizontal. All right. But that's sort of the myth that also, again, I get into when I talk about my critique of the Masonic deliverance prayers. A lot of errors in there, a lot of myths in that prayer group. This person says, what up, Buttercup question mark. I like that. It says, why are you so against traditional Catholics? That's not true. Again, that's an emotion that's not based upon reality. Genex says, who here believes in a flat earth? Cat Dunn, who hasn't even heard me out, hasn't even heard my argument, says, he's not saying we need to vote for evil. It's about choosing someone to avoid what is most evil. We basically have two choices. Why should I not vote to keep the most evil pushing people out of office? Again, that's a false dilemma. We'll get into the logical error false dilemma that we just have two options, right? And what the church actually teaches about the common good. A big emotional thing here. DG, find another profession. This is not my profession. YouTubing, making videos, that's not a profession. Doesn't even make me money. So I don't think that's just kind of emotional. Basically saying, oh, David Gray, we don't want to hear what you have to say. We would just want to stay in our little comfortable box. We don't want to hear any critique. We don't want to be challenged on anything. We just want to you don't talk to the choir enough, right? We like people who just speak to the choir, who affirm us in what we believe, who don't challenge us to think deeper and broader about things. No, just go away. I want to remain stupid. I don't understand that. So that's some of the pre-show comments, even before I started. And I'm sitting at basically a very like a D grade. I'm being graded as given a D already. People disliking the video, and I didn't even say anything. I think we really have to get away from that. I think that's really low intellect. It really is low information, low intellect, and so I think it's very problematic. But hopefully my grade rises. Hopefully I stay true to off code unscripted and what I like to bring in this show, which is information, a perspective that's consistent with what the church teaches. And so let's get into that now, because I do have some concerns about celebrity priests and celebrity exorcists. So let's get into that real quick. This is a David L. Gray show, off code, unscripted on St. Dominic's Media. Yeah, it's true. You may have heard me say this before about my dislike for celebrity in the church, especially when it comes to priests, when it comes to bishops, when it comes to exorcists. I don't like this new reality that we're living in of celebrity of celebrity exorcists. Like I said, I don't even like celebrity priest because I know how the line pursues all of us. As Peter says, that he's roaring around, the evil one is roaring around like a lion, looking for someone to devour. That's what we all face. But I know to chase at a lion is particularly dangerous for priests. I would say even more so for exorcists. And then when you add celebrity onto that, it's it takes a lot of prayer on our behalf for our priests and on their behalf for them not to fall into all the snares that the lion who is roaming around setting for them to fall into. The celebrity aspect just gives the lion who's roaring around, roaming around, looking for someone to devour. It gives them just a lot more arsenal to use in their attack against them. So that's one thing. The second thing, I'm also a huge fan of Laura Ingraham when she said in her critique about LeBron James meddling in politics and making political comments when she told him just shut up and dribble. I'm a huge fan of shut up and dribble. Whatever, what I believe that people should do what they are gifted to do, whatever they're talented in, whatever they're trained in, do that thing. I'm a huge fan of shut up and dribble. So this is why I like priests when they're celebrating the sacraments. That's what they're gifted in. That's their calling. That's the thing that they can do that no one else can do. Priests are clerics. They're here for healing, and we need healing, especially in this age. We need healing like no other time in the history of humanity. We need healing because we're engaging in a battle. And again, the lion is roaming around looking for someone to devour, and a lot of people are being devoured. And so we need to be healed from what the lion is doing to us. So that is the priest. That's their unique calling. That's their unique gift. That's the thing that they can do that no one else can do. All of us can teach, we can preach, we can evangelize, we can do YouTube videos. You can even make this your profession. But we cannot hear confessions. In Ephesians 4:11, the Apostle Paul talks about that the Lord God has given some people to be apostles, others as prophets, others as evangelists, others as pastors, others as prophets. So this is properly called a fivefold ministry. That's what Protestants like. I don't know if I've ever heard Catholics say fivefold ministry, but when I was a Protestant, this is people said, "Oh, that's the fivefold ministry. I'm operating in the fivefold ministry." And that was always an important thing, especially for those who call themselves the apostolics. So there is a place for a priest, obviously, even according to Paul here, to operate outside of the space of the sacraments. As a Dominican, we recognize that our life is both active and contemplative. So there's a time to be contemplative. There's a time to study. There's a time to pray. There's time to contemplate. There's a time for community, and also there's a time to be active. Right. So I recognize that. with Paul, with the Dominicans. Okay. But gift, talent, training. So the role of the priest in this regard is more unique than anyone else. Only the priests can be an apostle in this regard, what Paul is speaking. This calling to be, this unique calling to be sent to heal. So um so I'm a fan of whatever God has called you to do that is unique. Do that thing. Shut up and dribble. So that's my critique of, the whole exorcist celebrity, the exorcist priest. I don't like how these exorcists are operating today in the public space. This whole celebrity. Hostage to the Devil by Father Malachi Martin was one of the most fascinating books I ever read. I read that early on in my conversion. I have a close friend, I call him my brother, who is trained as an exorcist in Nigeria. And he came over to my house here, sat down at table with us, and told us some stories about his time as exorcist. Things that even now make my skin crawl. My wife Felicia had to get up from the table. Right? It's very uncomfortable. Some of the things that demons are doing to people, that demonic possession is doing to people. There's a deeper reality in the visible realm that people are not even aware of. This is why you have to stay in consistent prayer, stay prayed up. Because demonic activity is real, but God is greater than anything that a demon has for you. So stay close to God, stay close to Calvary. But honestly, I don't like hearing demon gossip. I don't like hearing demon gossip. Demon gossip is when these priests, when they get on YouTube, when they get these conferences and do these speeches, and they start telling us things that demons told them during exorcisms. Demon gossip. Another name is, I would say, demonic private revelation. Another name I would probably use is demonosis. Secret knowledge that has been passed down or given to a priest from a demon. And then he tells us. Demon gossip. I hate it. It's like I have a visceral disgust of when priests leave these exorcisms and they want to share with us demon gossip. This private revelation they receive from demons. It makes me sick to hear it because I know how people cling to it. And it makes them more curious about the demonic sphere, which is completely unhealthy. I heard Father Chad Ripperger um, attended one of his speeches at Our Lady of Sorrows in Lebanon, Illinois, which is a wonderful mystery. I recommend if you live anywhere near it, make sure you get to their conferences. But he was spewing some of that demon gossip there to a whole crowd of people in person. And I was like, what is this? Just hearing it, just felt very uncomfortable hearing this demonic private revelation. I said, what is this? Is this an episode of Demon and the Restless? As the demon world turns, what is this demon gossip? General Demon Hospital? And he kept saying during his talk, oh, this one demon said this. Oh, and I was doing this exorcism, and this other demon told me. Demon gossip. This is I find it to be harmful. Again, it's Gnostic. These priests do it. They do it. They have this gnosis, this knowledge, this secret knowledge that only they can give us. And people follow this stuff. They cling to it. And I think it makes them more curious about things they should not be curious about. Father Ripperger would say, he would cite a 1962 document saying that priests should ask these questions. Fine, okay. If I kind of like my exorcisms like Jesus did them, you just how the apostles did, just cast demons out in the name of Jesus. I think you could do that if you have faith. There's no more powerful words that you can utter on this earth in faith than Jesus Christ. That name is above all names. It is the most powerful name you can use. It can cast out demons. Um, but I get the idea of an exorcist book. I get that, the Latin prayers and all that. Whatever. I would prefer if priests just have faith and use the name Jesus and cast out demons. I think that works. But okay, I get it. The whole exorcism book, the ritual, the Latin prayers, fine. When the church is teaching, ask these demons questions. Okay, but keep that to yourself. That's your demonic private revelation. We don't need to hear that. So yeah, I have a critique about celebrity priests and celebrity exorcists. Right. But so I guess I'll put that on the table. Because I do lean into this when I hear these exorcists like Father Ripperger. Do I kind of lean in with a little negative bias? Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't have anything to do with the critique itself, right? Because that's not an emotion. The critique is not emotion. So let's get into the critique first about celebrity, about what the church actually teaches about voting. This is David L. Gray Show of Code, Unscripted on Saint Dominic's Media. All right, so I'm gonna play the whole video in a second about what Father Chad said, but first let me say that because I've heard people say, "Oh, David Gray, you're just really would you stop discouraging people from voting? This is an important election. This is the most important election of our lifetime." I think that's been every election since elections, the most important election of our lifetime. I'm sure when Thomas Jefferson was running against John Adams, I'm sure people said this is the most important election of our lifetime, right? Um, so, but I'm not trying to discourage people. What I'm trying to discourage is not people from voting. I'm trying to discourage people from being lazy because voting is not heroic. It's really not. It's not a heroic. You can't become a saint by voting. It's not a heroic act. It's not salvific. Demons can vote. Voting is not a corporal work of mercy. It's not. I think it's a way that lazy people feel as if though they are participating. And it's a government system of participation. It's a system that government created to validate itself. When you vote, you basically validate the system. That's all you're doing. And I find it to be a rotten and an evil system that's evil at its core. When I had JP on the show Monday show, he talked about articulated well about how the system is just godless that we live in. It's a godless system. So when we vote, we validate a godless system, right? So I'm not trying to discourage people from voting. I'm really just trying to discourage people from being lazy. If you want to vote, I guess fine if your conscience can lead you there. But what I want people is to do more. I want people to get into the corporal works of mercy. I want people really to participate, not in the government system, but in God's system, partaking in the divine nature. I think that's a higher calling, is what I like to call people to. But let's play this video here with Father Ripperger on the Terry and Jesse show and see what he has to say about voting.
Church has always said that we have a duty as citizens of a particular country to actually to vote. We actually have this duty to vote. There can be some things that can put that aside, but as a general rule, we have an obligation to actually vote. And so people will say, well, yeah, but right now we've got, for example, candidates who are not perfect. One actually holds stuff that's really evil, another guy that holds stuff that's also evil, but it's not as bad, etc. And so I don't want to vote for. And this is actually true even in relationship to other forms of legislation, because this discussion of this has been reiterated throughout the history of the church, all the way up even through John Paul II had actually talked about it. So, but the basic principle is that in a situation like that, then your obligation is to vote for the lesser of two evils. And the reason being is because in the lesser of two evils, people say, well, you're voting for evil. No, you're actually not voting for evil. When you're voting for a lesser evil, you're not voting for the person's evil or for the evil that the thing is doing. What you're voting to is to preserve the good that would be lost if the other opponent got in who's more evil, or if the legislation got passed in which was actually even worse, or what have you. So the point is you're voting to preserve the good. And in that sense, it's a morally good act. And also, if you don't do that, then you may be responsible if a more evil person gets in because of a failure on your part to vote, or the citizenry's to vote for the lesser of two evils. Then it's the sin of negligence, because you've actually let somebody who's more evil get into that particular thing. So we have an obligation to vote for the lesser of two evils, in order to be able to mitigate the evil and the damage that's actually done, and that's our obligation.
Well, that
And
was
it
well
was
said.
Saint, yeah, and
Go ahead.
it's Saint Thomas himself who began to really lay out the principle of the lesser two evils. It did occur before in moral theology, but from Saint Thomas all the way until modern theology, it has been held that it's a legitimate principle, and that there's no question in any moral theologian that I'm aware of that would ever question the legitimacy of this principle. And so, as I mentioned, from St. Thomas on, it's always been accepted because you're preserving the good that would otherwise be lost.
Okay, a lot of false statements there, a whole litany of them. And if you thought that sounded loopy when he says, people say, oh, it's voting the lesser two evils. And people saying, oh, we're voting for evil. We're not voting for evil. We're voting for the lesser two evils. If you thought that sounded loopy, it should sound loopy. It should sound like it doesn't make sense. It should sound like a used car dealer is trying to play a trick on you. That's what it sounds like. Words should not sound silly, and not just sound silly. Voting for the lesser of two evils is not voting for evil. That sounds like a contradiction, and it should sound like a contradiction because it is. But let's get into some of the points that he was making here about the whole. I want to really put this in context of probably what he was trying to say, but without sounding loopy, and sort of clear up some of the errors here about what he was saying. So what we're talking about, let's really just start real quickly. This is not going to really take long. I have a whole video at St. Dominic's Media on Catholic moral theology. Go to my catechism series. You could hear a longer video, maybe like 30 minutes, on what Catholic moral theology and Veritatis Splendor. That's over at stdominicsmedia.com. My series on catechism. So what we're talking about is a moral act. So a moral act, everything that we do, the church teaches, is a moral act, and everything that we do is either good or evil. That's what the church teaches. Everything is a moral act, and everything can be weighed out as either good or evil. There's nothing neutral. Okay. When it comes to moral acts, there are two main elements and a subsequent. The two main elements are the object itself, that's the moral action that you're doing, the thing that you're doing. And then there's the intention, the reason why you're doing it. Intention will have something to do with conscience and knowledge, okay? But there's an intention. And there's the subsequent element called circumstances. This is sort of like the outcomes of the thing, or not so much the outcomes, but the circumstances of the space in which the moral act is taking place, on what led you to do the moral act. I'd like to start the discussion on moral theology. Sometimes historically, traditionally, we like to start the conversation on moral theology with the moral act. I like to start with intention, because within the moral act, there's going to be multiple acts. For example, think about abortion. There's the moral act of abortion, but then there's all the thing that's included in it as well. There's the driving there, there's the paying for it, there's getting on the table. There's a lot of things that is included, a lot of little minor acts within the moral acts, but all those can be um, good or evil themselves. But the intention is what binds all those different moral acts together. So that's why I like to focus on intention. Okay. Now, when it comes to the moral act of voting, again, the object itself, the moral act is voting. That's the action in the ballot booth, okay, or casting the absentee ballot. Now, the moral act itself of voting is neutral, right? The moral act itself is neutral. It's neither. Well, I would say, maybe John JP from Abide the Fire. Perhaps he can convince me, probably, and I would maybe agree that in a godless society, the moral act of voting is always evil because it's a godless society. No matter how we vote, the action itself, I mean, the outcome is always going to be evil. All right. So I might be convinced about that. But let's be positive. Let's just say still the United States, perhaps maybe other places in the country. Voting is the moral act itself. It's just neutral. Okay. So then there is the intention. Like, why are you voting? What's compelling you? What's your deeper motive? And what are you doing? Why are you doing the thing? So why are you voting? So that's the intention. When your attention is applied to a neutral act, it can make that neutral act either good or evil. Okay, that's what it's going to do. So even you take, for example, you would say take a say just take a moral act, which is we would say lean into good. You see an old lady fall down in the middle of the street, a car is coming, so you run over there, you pick her up, you save your life. The moral act itself, we lean and say, oh, that's good. But what if your intention was vainglory? Well, take just a moral act like that, which is seems to be objectively good, and make it evil because it was about yourself. It was a good thing that you still saved your life, but you get no credit for that because you made the act evil because it was about you. So, but so if your conscience is like mine, and you find the whole system itself evil, that needs repair at the core before I could even vote, then there is no intention that could make voting possible because you find the act itself evil because your voting is just really again empowering an evil system, right? But if you were to find a good intention for voting, then you could vote. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. If you could find a good intention, because you would make the moral act, which is neutral, you make it good with a good intention. With an evil intention, where you make it evil. It's as basic as that. The next point is that a good intention is not an end. You're gonna say, well, I intend to vote because my vote will result in less evil. That's the end. You're saying, well, I'm voting for an outcome. You can't control outcomes. So you're saying the ends justify the means, which is not what the church teaches. The church says that's an error. The ends never justify the means. Veritatis Splendor is clear on that. Catholic moral theology after scholasticism is clear on that. Because you have no control over the ends. So this is why you cannot do things according to what you think the ends may be. You can only control the act and the intention if you're doing everything under free will, which are the primary things that God will hold you accountable for. The things that you freely chosen, the moral act and the intention. In paragraph, I should pull this up because in paragraph 1906 of the Catechism, this is what the church teaches about the common good, because that's central to this discussion, this framework of, oh, we have to vote for a lesser two evils. That's not what the church calls us to. The church calls us to do the common good. So let's have a quick discussion about what the common good is. All right, so in paragraph 1906 of the Catechism, the church defines the common good as this. It says the common good is to be understood the total sum of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more easily. The common good concerns the life of all. That's a very important sentence. The common good concerns the life of all. In this case, all means all. It calls for prudence from each and even more from those who exercise the office of authority. It consists of three essential elements. Let's get into those three essential elements. First, the common good proposes respect for the person as such. Second, the common good requires the social well being and development of the group itself. And finally, the common good requires peace. Okay. So this is what we are pursuing as Catholics, the common good. Now let's dive into let's just enter the catechism here because there's some things that we need to read. So this is what the Catholic Church actually teaches about voting. It only says, I think, just one thing about voting. Okay. So we hear people like Father Ripperger talk about, oh, this is what the church teaches. You have to vote for the lesser to evil. Well, does the church actually teach that? And then we'll get into Thomas Aquinas here and the principle of double effect, and we'll talk about the logical error of false dilemma. So in this section, the church is teaching about the duty of citizens. That's the duty of parents, duties of family members. Let me see. I think I lost it. Okay, 2338. Let me blow it up here and then scroll down for you. All right, so the duties of citizens. So this is the whole section that's going to deal with voting. This is your duty as a citizen. And this is, like I said, this is more of a modern teaching of the church. Most of our history as Catholics, we lived in a time when there were monarchs. Our duties were different. Our participation was different. But as a church moves to teach us how to operate as Catholics within these societies of free voting, populist voting, voting of the people, so to speak, even though that's looked different over times. And I think maybe now in the United States, maybe it's not even, I think it's just really just validating the system. I'll get into that shortly, real quick, how I think voting is probably the least effective thing you can do to change the system. I think voting, who becomes president, particularly who becomes president, voting probably plays a very minimal role in that. I would say corporations, social media. There's a lot of things that really determine money, who determines who becomes the president rather than people's votes, even if they're counted. But let's just say we're still living in a good system, in a free and fair system. The church would say, well, the duties of a citizen, those subject to authority should regard those in authority as representatives of God, who has made them stewards of his gifts. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution. Live as free men, yet without using your freedom as a pretext for evil, but live as servants of God. Their loyal collaboration includes the right and at times the duty to voice just criticisms of which seems harmful to the dignity of persons and to the good of the community. Again, it's the common good. In paragraph 2239, it is the duty of citizens to contribute, along with civil authorities, the good of society in a spirit of truth, justice, solidarity, and freedom. The love and service of one's country follow from the duty of guarantee and belong to the order of charity. Submission to legitimate authority and service of the common good requires citizens to fulfill their roles in the life of the political community. All right, so here the church is saying that the political community um, is not something separate from the whole. Right? There's not a political community and there's a community of the non-political. Rather, the political community fits in with the life of all. So therefore, all have a responsibility to voice concerns, to participate within the whole sphere of which the political community is involved. And lastly, in paragraph 2240, it delineates kind of what does that look like, this submission to authority. The church has already mentioned that criticism, um, uh, um, involvement. But here in 2240, it speaks more specifically. It says submission to authority and co responsibility for the common good make it morally obligatory to pay taxes, morally obligatory to exercise the right to vote, and morally obligatory to defend one's country. Okay. So this is what the church teaches. Now, the catechism is going to go ahead and assume that you've read the rest of the catechism. It's going to assume, okay, that you didn't just jump in at paragraph 2240, that you've actually have read the section on the Catholic Church's moral theology about the ends never justify the means, and that you cannot you cannot have do an evil moral act, nor can you have an evil intention, nor can your intention be evil in a neutral act. Right. So it says you have a it's morally obligatory to participate in the life of the church, to pay taxes, to exercise the right to vote, to defend one country. The church is saying that, well, should you pay your taxes if you know 100% of your taxes are going to go to kill people? No, it's going to say that you're going to protest. You're going to voice your concerns. You're going to do something about that. Defend one's country. Does that mean that you should go drop a nuclear bomb or Hiroshima, drop it on innocent people? You should just do evil to defeat? No, the church is going to assume that you've read the catechism. You cannot do evil. The same applies to a right to vote. You cannot vote to do evil. All right. So we have to be clear with these things about what the church teaches. The church is never asking you to do evil. So let's go back to intention then. If the church is saying we should participate in the common good, the good of all, not some, the good of all, and that we should not do evil, then the cause is really to weigh our intentions more carefully when it comes to voting, because intention is where it matters. If we're assuming that we're living in still a free, just society that's not godless, that everything is not just degenerating into evil, then we should be careful to weigh our intentions, because our intentions can determine whether the neutral act of voting becomes good or bad. Right? So I find that there's just some unrealistic intentions, I would say. I'll go through a few of them, because I'm not here to judge your intentions or your conscience or anything like that, but I'll lay some things out about, intention, what I think are just objectively weird, very weird intentions. that I think will make a neutral act of voting evil. I would say that people say, "Well, I'm gonna vote for the other guy because the other guy is more pro-abortion." Because I think that's the point that we're at now. That we have Kamala Harris. I think she goes by nowadays. I think she goes by Kamala. I think that sounds more Indian or something like that. I don't know why. I think she presents herself as a Black American. I think Black Americans are called Kamala. They was like Kamala, right? I think I've known Kamalas, never known a Kamala. But anyway, they say, well, Kamala, she's very pro-abortion. So I'm going to vote for Trump, who's less pro-abortion. Right? That's an intention that that's an intention that make a moral act evil because that's not the common good. That's not the common good for all. That's not the common good for babies in the womb. That's not a common good. Then I'm going to vote for the lesser pro-abortion person. That's strange. That's a strange thing to say. I think obviously President Donald Trump, who I voted for in 2016, 2020, his argument is, I think the only thing he's against is late term abortion, but there's caveats to that that we should just openly admit. Trump is for all the same things as Kamala is. He's for the abortion pill. Here in the military, when I go to a military base, I'm going to go there in an hour. If I go to the grocery store, there's in the military grocery store a whole row of Plan B. If I go to the gas station on base, a whole row of Plan B. Right there, right next to the condoms. Where else? Oh yeah, just the regular mall. Sure, like on base, we have what's called a BX or PX, depending upon if you're Air Force or Army. If you go into the mall, it's kind of like a place where you buy clothes. It's more like I would say like what does it look like? It looks like a Target. It's kind of like that. If you go into that aisle, there's a bunch of Plan B. Trump isn't getting rid of the Plan B pill on military bases. He could like that, but he's not. He's for in vitro fertilization. He's for limits with abortion up to 6 weeks. He's for exceptions, rape, incest. He's all in for the death penalty. Not a common good, not good for all people. And he's even fine with states passing radical laws. He says, well, I'm the one who's responsible for sending it back to the states. And we know in short time, I would say maybe 10 to 15 years, all 50 states are going to have pro-abortion laws. In about 15 years, all 50 states are going to have amended their constitution to allow for abortion, even Alabama and Mississippi. That's going to happen because money determines elections, not people. So whoever becomes president will not be able to stop all 50 states from, and Trump says he's not, legalizing weed and killing babies. That's what's going to happen in Alabama, Mississippi. There's going to be something on the ballot that said, hey, you want to smoke weed? Right. The other question is legalize abortion. Right. That's going to happen in all 50 states. And so the trajectory in this world is towards atheism. That's the trajectory. We should admit that. And either president, because this country is rotten at its core, because it was founded on the principles of Freemasonry, indifferentism, and freedom from religion. That's why it's right at its core. These principles of Freemasonry is founded by Freemasons and their allies. The Constitution is a Masonic document. The Declaration of Independence is more so one of the greatest Masonic documents ever written. So at its core, this country is inclined towards atheism because at its core, its nature promotes indifferentism and freedom from religion. So that's an unrealistic intention. I'm going to vote for a person who is the lesser abortionist. That's not real. Okay, so that's the evil intention. You're saying I'm going to the ballot booth to do evil. I'm voting for, my intention is to vote for abortion, just what I perceive to be less abortion. That takes the neutral act of voting makes it evil. Another, I think, unrealistic intention is, oh, I'm voting. My intention is to do more good than evil by voting for evil. That's just loopy. I don't even have to spend a whole lot of time there. I think you probably heard how silly that is on the surface. And again, we cannot stop the trajectory towards atheism by voting for the lesser of two evils, which you're calling a good. Another unrealistic intention is, I'm voting. By voting, I'm doing a common good. I think I just showed you what the church teaches about the common good. The common good is a good for all people, not some, not you. So it has to be good for all people. Again, so both persons are going to kill people. They're going to kill a lot of people. Either president, either Kamala or Donald J. Trump. A lot of people are going to die by some intentional decisions they make. Things that they either going to do or fail to do. That's just a fact. A lot of people are going to die from abortion, the abortion pill, in vitro fertilization, death row, wars. True, I think Donald Trump I think he's going to have less wars than Democrats. I think Democrats may start World War III. Probably not. I think the whole thing is about, who really controls this whole world is groups like Blackstreet and BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. These money managers who make money off of war. War nowadays is a boardroom decision. It's a line item on somebody's accounting books. That's all it is. So I think BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, they know when to stop the whole Ukraine thing, and when it's time to transition to make money again. Well, we made enough money selling bombs. Let's make some money rebuilding Ukraine. Right. I don't think it goes to World War III. Maybe. Right. But yeah, I think Democrats are more inclined to support that structure of war profiteering versus Donald Trump. But Donald Trump, he's going to drop some bombs. He's going to assassinate some people. Right. So it's not the common good. So that's the unrealistic intention. I think a last unrealistic intention I'll touch on is the idea that I'm voting because my vote matters. I'm voting because my vote matters. All right. So maybe you do live in a swing state. You don't live in California. Um, you don't live in Maryland. Right? You live in a state where you could impact the decision if voting actually does win elections. Right? I don't know. I'll have to push back against that. Like my vote matters, even in swing states. All right, because again, elections are run by political action committees. The money they make, party political committees, the money they have, it's being won by corporations. It's being won by foreign influence campaigns, social media influence campaigns, illegal votes, ballot harvesting. Secretaries of state have more influence over who becomes president than your vote because they made the rules. They're the ones that calibrate the absentee ballot machines. Are we going to read signatures or not? It's but the idea of voting is so far down the scale of things that impact elections. I just don't know. But I perhaps say if your intention is say, I'm voting because my vote matters. That's your intention. I'm just voting out of a civic duty to vote. I think that could be a good with a person who has limited knowledge. So it could take a more moral act of voting, a neutral act of voting, and make it good, perhaps. But that means that you really are kind of dumb. You're like an 18-year-old. Um, you just don't know anything, something like that. But I think there's people who could vote because they're voting because my vote matters. All right, so I'll say that. All right. Let me put a zip in here because I think I exhausted that point about the morality of that argument. What Father Ripperger was saying. I think I explained what the church actually teaches. It doesn't teach what he says. It's talking about the common good. You do have a duty to participate in the common good. But voting, but the church doesn't say that it has to be voting. Especially, it has a parameter here that is saying that it cannot, any of these things. How you're saying you should participate, whether it's defending your country, whether it's paying your taxes, or voting. The church isn't saying that you should be doing those things if those things are evil, right? So that's church teaching. So let me put a zip here so I can sort of transition to and I will say here before I get into Thomas Aquinas, I just want to say I think that it disappoints me when it comes from priests and when it comes from bishops. It disappoints me that there is more emphasis on voting. There's more emphasis on telling you that you have to vote than telling you that you have to be holy. I'm really disturbed by this emphasis, this drive, this push to get out the Catholic vote. I want priests, I want bishops to tell you that your call is to holiness. Not that you have your duty is to holiness, not your duty is to vote. Oh, the fact of the matter is that we have a king. We know his name. His name is Jesus Christ. So what are we talking about? I think if you really want to fix the world, you want to work on building, you want to work on building a climate where people pursue holiness. Because more holy people means that there's less sin. If there's less sin, there's a better world. There are no political solutions, my friends. There's only political problems. That's a fact. There's no political solutions, there's just political problems. And so we do not need a system of governance of these elected leaders. We have a king. We don't just have a king, we have the king of kings. We have commandments. We know the law. We have grace to help us follow the law. What are we talking about? The only thing that these systems lead to, these worldly systems, is the demonic. Again, we're on a trajectory towards atheism. If you don't see it, I don't know what type of prescription I can prescribe you. The only thing these systems lead to is again the demonic. God is, I think, just being patient with us, like he's being patient with the Jews who demanded to have a king like their neighbor. But he promised one day to raise up a true king. But for a lot of us, Christ as a true king still isn't good enough for us. Give us Trump. Give us Biden. Give us Kamala. There's more emphasis on voting and on how we should vote than how we should be holy. There's more emphasis on electing a ruler than evangelizing Christ Jesus. But the concept of choosing the lesser of two evils, let me touch on that. Because, he said that was, Father Ripperger said, oh, this came from Thomas Aquinas. Now, according to, choosing the lesser of two evils in the context of voting, it's oftentimes, we hear this argument a lot from a lot of people that it's associated with the moral philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas. Although, obviously, he did not directly address this system of democratic republic elections. He just wasn't living in that time. During this time, even back in Roman times, there may have been some voting for some representatives in some sort of synod. In a conclave, people may have voted for a pope. But as far as the idea of populist voting, all people voting, Thomas Aquinas isn't talking about that. That was not a reality that he knew about. So we have to be very careful when we want to apply what he teaches to the current situation. and even sort of weaponize him against the magisterium. We have to be careful about that. Now, he did teach the principle of double effect in Summa Theologia, right? And it's a principle to use to evaluate situations where an action has both evil and good effects. Now, according to this principle, an action with both good and evil effects may be permissible if the action itself is good or morally neutral. So the good effect is not achieved by the means of the evil effect. The intention is a good effect, and there is a proportional grave reason for permitting the evil effect. So he's open to the idea of evil coming from an act. Okay. And that's just reality. I think all actions are good or evil. But the church is calling us to do to form our conscience as Catholics and to always choose the good. Right? But Thomas Aquinas is saying that, well, um, there could be an evil effect in a good intention, I think. So, in context of voting, this principle can be applied to, I would say, when a voter is faced with a choice between two imperfect candidates. So, the voter's intention is not to support any evil policy, but to limit the harm by choosing a candidate who represents the possibility of less harm or more good, even if that's not the ideal. All right. So that's how people apply Thomas Aquinas' principle of double effect, of mitigating evil. So this approach is not about voting for evil, people would say. They would say that um, it's about making rather just a prudential judgment to bring about a greater good and maybe lesser evil. The clear problem, I think, in this philosophy of Thomas Aquinas' principle of double effect is that it's double. Um, I think there's just the obvious logical fallacy that applies here is a logical fallacy of false dilemma, as if we have two choices. Right? That's always the case. When people say, "Oh, you just have two choices: one good, one evil, or one evil, the other evil, less than the other evil." These are your two choices. Pick one. That's a logical false dilemma. What if there's a third option? Right? What if it's not just the lesser two evils that I have to choose between? And I think that's very clear, a clear option for us Catholics. What if we didn't have to vote the lesser two evils, but rather chose to do the good ourselves? What if to do the common good for all people, we chose just to pursue the corporal works and spiritual works and mercy? What if we just chose the Beatitudes? What if we just chose to be holy and our holiness became infectious? What if we chose that? What if we chose to be saints? Our calling as Catholics is just higher than a worldly system of voting. It's just higher. So that'd be my response to the this principle of the double effect and how it's a logical false dilemma. I think there's a third option, maybe a fourth and a fifth. I don't have to choose the worldly system to exercise anything, especially if I think that it's going to be evil. I could choose a higher calling, a higher good, a true good. The Beatitudes, the corporal spiritual works of mercy, being a martyr. I just have a different path, a higher path than the world. Because I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world. So that's just really my quick response to just the Thomas Aquinas argument and how things is just the obvious logical fallacy that I don't even have to spend a whole lot of time with. Let's get to the topic on Freemasonry. This is David L. Gray Show, off code, unscripted on Saint Dominic's Media. So I'm going to play this video from Father Ripperger. This is part 2, and when he's talking about Freemasonry and Mason deliverance prayers. So I want to get into that, and I want to talk about this idea of generational curses and ancestral curses.
Father, here's a big question. It's a constant question. You'll find women in marriages that are married, oftentimes married to an unbelieving husband, and now the wife finds out that there's, through the great, grandmother or grandfather, they find out that there's a high level Freemason in the family, grandpa, grandma, great grandpa, great grandma, that they're both 33 degree Masons. So now the woman knows she has to do something. The husband's an unbeliever. They get your book, and in your book you have their generational, how to break Freemasonic curses. So my question is, a wife who's a believer and has discovered that she comes from a family of high-level Freemasons, and she knows because she opened up her chest and found Scottish 30 degree rings from the Scottish Rite Order and certificates and their Bible. The wife, using your book, number one, she's supposed to do these renunciation prayers with her husband, correct? Or can she do them by herself? Or she should do them in the presence of a priest, spread over 3 weeks, and should the husband lead the prayers even if he's an unbeliever?
Okay, so the way it works is that the Freemasonic curse actually comes through the blood lineage, and so technically speaking, she she can actually say those prayers for her because the kids are coming. If it's in her side of the lineage, then the husband should join with her to boost the effect of the prayer. But ultimately, she has to be the one to do it to break the curse because it's coming through her. So she can actually say it. But I always try and get the husband involved. If it comes from his side and he's an unbeliever, then we've got another different type of dynamic because she's not a whole lot she can do. I mean, she can say the prayers, but it's not going to have much an effect. In the end, he's got to be the guy that's got to do it. So there's that. So then how to do it. So we usually tell people to do the prayers 3 times, whether it's 3 successive days or whether it's once for 3 successive weeks. And we tell them to do it for three times. And the reason being is that in our experience, and this is a pretty consistent pattern, if they say the prayers to break the Freemasonic curse, if they say it the first couple of times and even the 3rd time and they don't experience anything negatively in the process, that means that they probably weren't subject to the curse or that it's been broken. But a lot of times what will happen is if they are subject to the curse, people will start to say the prayer. So I'll give you an example. There was a priest who was a friend of mine who suffered from a lot of respiratory issues, which is very common among Freemasonic curses. And so what happened is he said the prayers the first time, and he literally, his vision would go blurry. He couldn't even hardly say the words, etc. Wow. But by the time he got through the 3rd time, then the 2nd time it's a little bit less. The 3rd time he's able to say the prayers without any difficulty. Boom, it broke it, and then he stopped suffering from asthma and things of that sort. So we tell people to do it 3 times, and there's a reason for doing it 3 times, because this is the pattern. If they say it 3 times, and by the time they get to the 3rd time, they can get through the prayers and there's no difficulty, that means that they are no longer subject to the curse. Whereas if they get to the 3rd time and the effect is still the same, they're saying the prayers, they're still having the same prayer, like they can't seem to get a particular word out, or they got this blurred vision, or there's something that's going on, or they just feel blocked in trying to be able to say a section, something along that line. What that's an indicator of is that it's not so much connected to Freemasonry as it's connected to some form of witchcraft, because all of the Freemasonic rituals, and even the ones that are mentioned being broken in that prayer, all come from other forms of witchcraft, whether it's Pelican witchcraft, Russian witchcraft, or what have you. So it all comes from other things. So their rituals actually come from other forms of witchcraft. And what that's happening is the demon's pinging off of the other form of witchcraft. So that's just been our consistent experience.
Father, do they have to say this with their pastor, with their priest, or could they say it by themselves inside the church, in front of the Blessed Sacrament, in front of the tabernacle, in a lonely church?
It's preferable that they do it in front of the Blessed Sacrament. It's preferable that they do it with a priest, but they don't have to. It doesn't have to be done with a priest. Some people say that there's some exorcists out there who are saying, well, it has to be confirmed by the priest. That's actually not true. The priest isn't the one who breaks the curse. It's the person saying the prayers that breaks the curse in this particular case, because it's come through their lineage. Whereas if it's so in that sense, it doesn't work quite the same way as other forms of cursing do, where the priest would normally break it.
Okay. So you saw that, you heard that. I'm not going to get so much into the Masonic deliverance prayers. Like I said, I'm going to post the links in the description box where I do an exhaustive, where I read the whole thing and I commented on it along the way. So I'll link those in the description box below. And I didn't read it 3 times in a video. You know, it sounds like kind of magic to me. Tap your heels 3 times and you'll leave the Wizard. Was this a place in the Wizard of Oz? I don't know what the place is called. Just tap your heels 3 times. It just sounds like magic to me. All right. I'm glad the church doesn't believe that we have to be baptized 3 times and then it works. Just oh my gosh. Like, where do I even start with this? Where do I even start? Because I think my issue with this is that people are leading you into not trusting the sacraments of the Catholic Church. In the name of Jesus Christ. It's just so frustrating to me with the celebrity exorcists are leading people into these sacramentals and these other things. It's just, why can't we just trust the sacraments? What happened to confession? All right, let me be serious. Because I can do a whole comedy routine on this. But I guess just to start with the whole, first clue is someone that has no clue what they're talking about when it comes to Freemasonry is when they say the word Freemasonic. Freemasonic is not even a word that Freemasons have even heard of. It's like taking 2 things that are maybe somewhat related and putting them together like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like there's jelly, which is a fruit, then there's peanut butter, which is a root, then there's peanut butter, which comes in the root, which are nuts, which are roots, and then there's bread, grain, right? You put those things together and you call it a pajelli sandwich. Okay, but that's not how really words work unless you're German. Germans do that all the time. They'll put things together that don't go together. The street that I live on is called Kniebestrasse, right? Which means knee broken. Okay, how did you put those 2 things together though? Make it one word. But so there's Masonic, which pertains to the Masonic orders. Right? And then there's Freemasonry, which is just craft Freemasonry, the first 2 degrees. If you may have a lodge, you may see a lodge called a Masonic Lodge, a Masonic Temple. That means it has several different houses that are meeting there. It has a Scottish Rite, has a York Rite, has Eastern Star. A lot of people are meeting there. So it's a Masonic Temple, a Masonic House. Right. But there's Freemasonry. So you don't put something together to say Freemasonic. It's just really so embarrassing. Like, because you always have to explain this when you're trying to evangelize Freemasons. Why do you Catholics call it? You Christians say Freemasonic. It's just that's your first clue. Somebody doesn't have a clue what Freemasonry is, and it's harmful to our evangelization to Freemasons when they have to hear imaginary words. My sister Brianna, she likes to say that the word Freemasonic sounds like a band, and it does. It does sound like a band. Not even a good one. Sounds like a rock band. It sounds like Freemasonic sounds like when a guy went and bought his first six string. Yeah, he went and bought his first six string. Maybe bought it at like a 5 and dime. Played it till his fingers bled. Something that probably would happen, around 1969. Right? The Freemasonic sound like, some guys who, from school started a band, tried real hard until they quit. Somebody got married. They all knew that they never get far. All right. Those are the Freemasonics. So ontologically, I mean, let's so let's just talk about what's going on here and just put this whole thing in context. Like, who are we? Who are we? Ontologically and anthropologically, our nature and just who we are physically and at the core of essence. Like, who are we? Ontologically, anthropologically. Our human nature. We are the imago Dei. We are the image and likeness of God. And we were created good with original virtue. We are, we're born in this fallen state due to the transmission, the original sin, that which is transmitted to everyone born of woman, except Jesus and Mary. And because of that, because we had the original sin transmitted to us, this obedience, this inclination towards sin, we're inclined to sin and unable to always powerfully choose our original virtue. But we have the free option of being healed of the original sin and being raised to the dignity of being superhuman through the sacrament of baptism. And therefore, because now we're superhuman, we have a greater inclination towards being able to freely choose original virtue. Okay. Period. Stop. That's who we are as human beings, anthropologically and ontologically. So then, therefore, how do these so-called generational curses fit? I don't think there's a you can't really find this in catechism or anything, so there's no consistent definition for these things called generational or ancestral curses. But the idea is that you are immediately and directly affected, impacted by your forebears. That's the idea. You're immediately or directly impacted by your forebears. Things that they either did or things that they failed to do. So Father Ripperger would even say that if you are even related to a Freemason, you heard him say it's in your blood. That Freemasonry is somehow in your bloodline. That somehow your whole DNA is changed, and you have type O blood, but next to the type O blood is also a Masonic symbol. I don't know, somehow it's just in your A positive, B negative, just in your bloodstream, just floating around somewhere. This Masonic square and compass, right? And the only way to heal it is by saying a prayer 3 times and clicking your heels. Right. So generational curses seem to run counter to just who we are as human beings and what baptism does, and what the sacrament, the effect of the sacraments. Now, clearly, there's plenty of scientific, scriptural, principally, and psychological data out there to prove that people are affected by the behaviors of others. Now, if this is all the celebrity exorcists are saying, like we'll pause for a second on the whole blood transmission thing. We'll pause on a second for that. But if all they're saying is that you are affected at times by the behavior of others, if we want to call that generational curses, I wouldn't use curses, but if we want to call that generational effective sin, then I'm completely fine with that. There's scripture, there's scientific data to back all that up. Some instances immediately come to mind, like Native Americans who struggle with alcoholism. That seems to be something just in their DNA. Right? Those who struggle with same-sex attraction, a high percentage of them were abused as a child or a very young person, adolescents, typically by a man. Whether they end up being same-sex attracted to a man or same-sex attracted to women, the roots of that tends to be sexual abuse by a man at an early age, and they may not have memory of it. Some STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, can be transmitted to an infant at birth. Syphilis, herpes, HIV, monkeypox. All right. So maybe if we're saying, well, if there's something in the blood, okay, I'll go there with that. Broken homes. If we're talking about generational things, broken homes from divorce or parents never married. Those children raised in broken homes have a higher likelihood of dropping out of high school, having children outside of marriage. They have a higher percentage of being abused sexually. They have a higher percentage, again, repeating the pattern of being married out of having child out of wedlock. They have a higher percentage of abortion. They have a higher percentage of continuous cycle of poverty. They have a higher percentage of falling into crime because they live in crime-ridden neighborhoods. So in many instances, it has become generational. I know people who their mother was on welfare. They now on welfare. Their children end up being on welfare. There's generational poverty, generational welfare. So I'm okay with that. Because people are sometimes affected by the behaviors of others, either virtuous or evil. Sometimes we don't talk about generational virtue enough. We don't. Because I think there's good behaviors that people and families have that affect people to live virtuously. We don't talk enough about that, what those behaviors are and how we should model them. We do talk a lot about generational sin, right? Because people are affected again by the behaviors of others, living and the dead. But what are we talking about? What's the remedy for these things? So there's one source of virtue, and that's God. One source of virtue. There's three sources of temptation to sin. That's the world, the flesh, and the devil. Again, one source of virtue, God. Three sources of temptation, which leads to sin: the world, the flesh, and the devil. So therefore, if we're affected by someone's behavior, in which of those three areas are you being affected? Which three areas is it coming from? If you're being tempted towards sin, is it from the world, the flesh, or the devil? I think we should get to that. All right. I get contacted in my emails by so many times from people who asking me about, oh, my grandfather was a Freemason or things like this. What should I do? Should I pray the prayers of son deliverance and all this stuff? And this is what really comes to mind. Like, okay, well, what sin are you committing? What's the temptation? Where is it coming from? The world, the flesh, or the devil? I think sometimes we elevate Freemasonry to be something that is really not. We don't really understand the works of Satan, how he uses, whether it's Freemasonry, communism, again, to tempt us through the three sources: the world, the flesh, and himself. Right? So sometimes we have to get to really the root of things without making these boogeymen, because if we keep making these boogeymen, then sometimes we never get to the core. Father Ripperger himself said, people sometimes click their heels 3 times and pray them signing prayers of deliverance, sometimes they realize, oh, it's not that. Maybe it's something else. How about we just get to the root first? So there is sin and virtue. Virtue does not need a remedy, again, because it leads to holiness. Our call in life is to find out how we consistently choose virtue. That's it. Choose virtue. But sin does have a remedy. The remedy for sin is a person, not a thing, not clicking your heels 3 times. The remedy for sin is a person named Jesus Christ. He is the remedy for the original generational sin, which is our sin from our first parents that is transmitted to us. And Jesus Christ is the balm for all other sins. Christ himself has been raised up to be the source of our healing, to be our balm, our remedy for all sin. And to accomplish this great mercy, he principally works through the sacraments of his church. What are sacraments? Sacraments are actions of the church through which Christ continues to minister to his people. The sacraments that we can talk about the sacraments of healing. I'm talking about baptism, Holy Eucharist, penance and reconciliation, anointing of the sick. So we have a remedy to be healed of those things, those temptations and those sins that are affecting us through the world, the flesh, and the devil. So I would say that if you have knowledge of a family member's sins, or their behaviors of the past or the present, then you should not stop at that point of saying, because their behavior was this or that, therefore it affects me. Oh, my grandfather's a Freemason, therefore it affects me. It's affecting my behavior. I'm a victim to what he did or failed to do. Like, we're not victims because of people's past behavior. That's a non sequitur. It doesn't follow. So you have to be able to, again, name the sin you're committing or the temptation or inclination, in the source of that sin or the temptation or inclination. Where is it coming from? The world, the flesh, or the devil? And again, like I said, people, they contact me all the time in my email asking me about this. Some people say, well, I prayed the prayer, all these times. I don't know if it worked. I think there's an uncertainty that's attached to these Masonic deliverance prayers that are just unhealthy. So I really encourage people just to turn to the sacraments. There's a sacrament that you can receive more than one time. It's called penance and reconciliation. That's the remedy that comes from God himself. Being able to, again, discern, make a good confession, and turn to that remedy is the best option we have to be able to have greater access to the capacity that we have to be able to always choose virtue. The sacrament of penance and reconciliation frees us truly from sin. It completely resets us. It's the closest thing that we have to baptism, to do over and over and over again. Even the Mass itself has prayers of non-sacramental absolution for venial sins. Get to the Mass as often as you can. Get to confession as often as you can. Trust in the sacraments, people. But when people contact me, again, it's like they want to know, and ask, what sins does your grandfather's membership in the Freemasons or the Elks or the Moose, whatever, what sin is it causing you to commit? Sometimes they say none. So what's the concern? So the concern so if you're concerned about your grandfather's sins, they're not affecting you, but you're concerned by his sins. The default isn't to just be afraid by, oh, because I'm associated. There's something in my blood. No, the response is to pray for their soul. That's the response. Oh, my grandfather's Freemason. So pray for their soul. I don't know why the celebrity exorcists are just immediately being, oh, be concerned about yourself and what's in your blood. Click your heels 3 times. And we already are inclined towards selfishness. And I think the celebrity exorcists are saying, be more selfish, be concerned about yourself. I think the right response, if your grandfather was a Freemason, is pray for his soul. Should you like burn everything, his certificate, his membership card, his rings? No, I don't have a whole lot of guidance there, but what I will say is that I'm more concerned about those things that have been directly used in Masonic rituals. Unless he's a 33rd degree in Jesse and was kept talking about the 33rd degree. He always says that like that's the highest degree. When I was a Freemason, I had like over 50 degrees. The 33rd degree is not the highest degree. Stop promoting that myth. Silly. Um, and what was I saying? Oh, and so yeah, should you be burning up all that stuff? Like I said, I think I'm more concerned about the things that were directly used in rituals. That's what I was saying. So the 33rd degree. So Masonic rings. So Masonic rings aren't immediately attached to degree work, ritual work. But the 33rd degree ring is. I would be more concerned about things like that. I'd be more concerned about a Masonic Bible that may have been used in a ritual. I would be more concerned about vestments, regalia, aprons, stuff that were immediately and directly part of a Masonic ritual because we don't know what else attached to those things, right? So when you're praying the Masonic obligation, you're at the altar and you're praying to a demonic god because you're saying you pray these really gruesome prayers. Cut off my throat, pluck out my breast, these things like kill me if I reveal the secrets. And then you say, so help me God and keep me steadfast. So what God did you just pray to this God that said kill me in this gruesome way? That's not the God of life. That's not Jesus Christ. That's not the Holy Trinity. So that's a demon that you just prayed to. So anything attached to that demon, um, in those Masonic obligations, yeah, I would say burn. If it wasn't necessarily, and I really don't have any guidance, but don't wear them, right? If you can melt him down if it's metal, yeah, maybe do something, right? But do be concerned about those things that were associated with that Masonic obligation, because we don't know what came through that portal when they said that prayer. But again, this idea that I need to pray this prayer 3 times to get this monkey off my back, I think that's off. I think instead, again, we should pray for their soul. However, if we can identify a sin, let's say, oh, my grandfather was a Freemason, and I am sinning, I am being tempted, I am inclined to this or this or that. And then we have to go to the source of that temptation inclination. What is the source? That does require discernment. It requires contemplation. It demands time before the crucifix. It demands again before the Holy Eucharist as well, a time in adoration if that's possible. It requires discernment that may require you to go very deep. It may require attention to see a Catholic counselor, psychological counselor, to maybe help you explore those things. All right, because discernment is required. I think just this quick solution to tap your heels 3 times and pray this prayer, I think that's the easy way out. I think it's harmful. There's no resolve there. It's not like confession. You've been absolved of your sins in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It doesn't give you that resolution. You just don't know. It has a Protestant vibe to it in that way. You know how Protestants pray these prayers of deliverance has that type of vibe to it. So I would say do the work of confession, mass, discernment, contemplation, maybe get some counseling help. Increase your prayers to the Holy Spirit and the Blessed Mother Mary. Right. So do the work that's required rather than taking the easy way out. Be Catholic. That's what I would say. And I've been here for a long time. This is like an hour. This is like a 90-minute show. This is crazy. But let me get out of here. Let me get to your comments before I go. And I will put the timestamps in this video so we can split apart the whole thing. This is the David L. Gray Show, off code, unscripted, on Saint Dominic's Media. All right, it's that time of the show when I get to your comments. And boy, you have a lot of them. I was kind of looking at them as I went along. There's a lot of like personal, emotional stuff. Like I actually like point out like what the church teaches, and someone says, "Oh, I believe Father Ripperger." Okay, like, oh, okay, I can't do anything with that, right? That's emotion, right? That's culty. But let me get into I think some comments that maybe I will make fun of some of those. I don't know, you know me. But let me try to get into some that I think are more substantive. Here's one from JP of By the Fire. He's a writer of St. Dominic's Media. You can find him at bythefire.com as well. We did an interview on Monday on a Monday show where we were talking about voting and things like that. Wonderful paper he has. Now, thanks for that, JP. He says the Incompatible Between Freemasonry and Catholicism playlist here at St. Dominic's Media has all the receipts along with wise insights here. I put a lot of work over the past 14 years building a catalog and courses and books to explain what Freemasonry actually teaches and what the church actually teaches in regards to why we cannot be Freemasons. So yeah, please take advantage of that. It's all free. I don't think the course is over at St. Dominic's Media, but I think I'll make it free again in the future as we transition some of our products over there. Laura says ripping on Ripperger. I like that. That's I should have named the video that. No, it's not. That's not personal. This person says Christians playing demons have a hierarchy. One demon more powerful than another demon. Seems like we're always choosing between two demons, and they end up hating the sight of voice of whoever is elected president. Wow. TPAD points out Catechism paragraph 240, without pointing out 238, 239, or the section on the common good. So this is a typical go-to people saying, oh, it's right here in Catechism about voting. Yeah, but again, the Catechism assumes that you've actually read all those other paragraphs before it. You're at 240 now. There are 2,239 paragraphs before that. The church assumes that you read this thing in sequence. Dinas asks, don't you think social media gives certain priests a good platform to spread their word based on their specialty? For example, in Exorcist, absolutely. I think you look at Paul's fivefold ministry, one of those things was teaching. And I think the teaching opportunities on social media are wonderful. I like priests there. I love them when they're offering the sacraments. So there's a like and a love. But also, like I said, I pointed to just the celebrity aspect. I think is dangerous, and it concerns me. That's one thing. And there's a whole modern days. There's a whole cult aspect to people. These social media priests have become bigger pastors. There was a time when a priest was a pastor of his church, or like a Saint John Vianney. People would actually go, live there or go see him. So you had bigger pastors, right? People with bigger flocks. But social media has given some priests who don't need a global flock, right? And it's given people, and there's an aspect of cult. I said, people tend to follow priests without discerning them. And so there's this there's this intermingling there of people establishing a cult, and then the priest feeling as though he has to satisfy his cult. And so I tend to see priests like Father Chris Alar, who tends to fall into this habit of just preaching to his cult the things his cult wants to hear. And so that concerns me. So like everything, social media is, things are good, things can be harmful. So so where do I lean on that as far as like YouTube and social media for priests being good or harmful? I would tend to lean on harmful um more than good. I'm like 60-40 on that. Matt Juno says, I think it's a great opportunity to invite Father Ripperger on the channel to discuss this and debate. Maybe it is, right? I tend to be very careful about what priests I have on a platform, right? Or people altogether that I have on a platform. Because what I'm most concerned about is your soul. So I've done, when I had my radio show, Guadalupe Radio Network, I remember doing shows when I didn't discern my guests well. And I ended up having to just delete shows from social media altogether so people would never see them. So I try to be very careful about that. And so I wouldn't want Father Ripperger on here sharing demon gossip. We're not doing that. Carol says, yeah, I believe this. Like I say, there's no political solutions. There's only political problems. She says, yeah, I feel there's no political solution to a spiritual problem. Yeah, that's true as well. Karen PhD, there's a snarky comment. Tell us your education, David. You are simply not credible. Ma'am, just type in David O. Gray. Don't be lazy. Just go to social media, some sort of YouTube, some sort of search engine, type in David O. Gray. I come up everywhere. There's even a Wikipedia page about me. All my education is there. All my books. So I don't have to tell you about my education here. This is public information. So just don't. It says you have a PhD next to your name, so don't be lazy. Just do your research, and also, and so what you're arguing here is logical fallacy. You're saying, you're arguing, you're questioning the authority, saying, oh, what you're saying is not credible because you don't have, you may not have the degrees to support what you're saying, right? Uh, so you're arguing from authority, but you're doing it blindly. All right, you negatively arguing from non-authority, doing it blindly. Like you haven't even done the research to see what degrees I have. So it's kind of like a cheap shot. It's not something I expect from a PhD, but there's a lot of dumb PhDs out there, So I get it. Welcome to the show. Thanks for watching. Kristen's praying, saying, Father Ripperger just accurately explained what is in the Catechism regarding voting and as a moral obligation. And that's actually not true. I guess you posted that comment before I completely destroyed, and I would say explain what the church actually teaches. So sometimes you just have to wait for it, right? Like, give me a chance. Like, don't give the show a negative grade before it even comes on. Like, hear me out, hear what I have to say. Diana said it would be advisable to listen and maybe learn something from David O'Gray. I have. Thanks, Diana. I try to have auto receipts. I try to back things up. Oh, here's the PhD coming back in. As I suspected, half educated. As for the Mass, the TOM has all the riches of symbolism to lead us to the fullness of faith. The Novus Ordo. What is this show about? Were we talking about the TLM, the Novus Ordo? I don't. Again, these are the PhDs that we have running around today. Right? Dr. Peter K explains the common good. All right. I'll leave Diana to that one. That's really just the best response. Oh, and then Christian Praying came back in. So after she heard Father Ripperger, oh, he explained everything. Then I speak. Father Ricken gave the correct explanation. Sorry. No need to apologize. If that's just where you're at, that's where you're at. You have to apologize for your opinion. And it annoys when people say sorry. That's kind of like they're not really sorry, are they? Are they? They're not. But that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. Marmar says, I'm always disappointed when the clergy get political and want to tell you how to vote. Even Jesus used the coin to give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And that's absolutely right. And I find it very interesting that what belongs to Caesar is not the human person. Caesar has no authority over the human person because the human person is the imago Dei, it's the image of God. Only God has authority over our life and our death. And so it's interesting that we would dare vote to give Caesar authority over life and death. Even though Jesus himself refused to give him that. Caesar has no authority over the imago Dei. How dare we give it to him? I think we'll be held accountable and judged for that in the end. I'm not participating in that anymore. But if you want to, we all have our own personal judgment day. You know, enjoy yours to the best of your ability and prepare for it. Prepare for it well. And Marmar also pointing to the logical false dilemma. Yeah, there's more than just two options. And oftentimes there's a greater option than people are giving us. Free thinking said, why bother voting if you're just going to do a write-in? Write-ins will never win. So thanks you just wasted your vote and hurt others in the process. Yeah, I think that's an option people just have. Oh, just write in your name. I don't know. I'm kind of like with free thinking. We won't agree on probably voting, the efficacy of voting, but I would agree that if you're going to go to the point of just write in a name, then I mean, what are you doing? I don't know. I think you're participating in the cult of voting at that point. And you want to go get your sticker, your sign of baptism that you've been obedient to the system. I voted. That's just culty behavior. I like break free from the cults. Either you're going to vote or not vote. So, Gloria is saying that as for me, I don't want to live in a communist society. Catholics will not be able to practice the faith of being, or even show any signs of being Catholic. That is why I vote for Trump. Yeah, I respect that. If that's your intention, I would say let's look at that intention. The moral act of voting is neutral. So my intention to vote is a negative intention. It's saying I don't want to live in a communist society. The church has been clear on communism. That is the evil. So if that's your intention, I would say just taking that, isolating that from everything else. I would say that's an intention compatible with church teaching, and it could make a neutral act good. Now we can have a whole other conversation, I think, about the trajectory of the society towards atheism. Um, I already talked, a little bit about that. But if we just isolate this from this everything else, I think what's going on in this godless society and saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm voting for Trump because I reject communism," and Kamala Harris is clear that she's a communist. Okay, there we go. Gloria has, I think, an isolated from everything else, a good intention, very good. All right. Tap your heels 3 times to say. Yeah, when I was When I was talking, I looked to the side. I saw murmur. I saw you said that. That immediately came to mind. So that's why I used it in the video. Tap your heels 3 times and say da da da. Yeah. Um, TJ Pass says your behavior during this video leads me to believe that maybe you should say those prayers 3 times. Maybe I'll do that. I did it one time in the other video. Maybe I'll just say it 3 times to prove to you I can actually articulate the whole thing 3 times. And I also wear a dress and tap my heels while I say it. How about that video? That'll go viral. Come on, give me a break. I trust in the sacraments. Free thinking had made a lot of comments just about politics in general and black pastors and how Democrats use them. He says it baffles me how so many black churches are super conservative, but then vote for Democrats against their faith. The Christ leave you when you walked out the front of the door. Yeah, people detach ballot booth from their faith. They detach it from their judgment day. People think that what they do in the ballot booth is kind of what they do in the bedroom, their business, not yours. And it's kind of like it doesn't have any effect on anyone else. Um, but yeah, a lot of inconsistency. But it's a cult. Voting is, I think, is the cleverness of creating a system that they spend a lot of time manicuring over for the past 3 centuries of convincing people that they have to vote for one or two parties is one of the greatest machinations in the history of the world. I think when this whole thing is over and it collapses, and it is going to collapse because democracy built on this type of foundation is not going to last. When it finally collapses and the history books are written, I think we're going to look at this as a marvelous achievement that lasted so long by creating this government system of compliance, by calling something, oh, you have to vote, it's free, it's not obligatory. But it's not free, it's not, and it is obligatory because we need you to keep the system going. And Americans over the centuries have kept this system going by validating it with their vote. That's the only reason why America is still here, because we vote. And the idea of the disintegration of the republic, where we went from representatives who do represent us, perhaps by going to some far off place to the state house of Washington D.C. to represent our interests, how to disintegrate it into them, we electing them to represent their own interest and gain their own wealth. Yet this whole thing continues. There's not one representative or one senator who's actually representing the people. Everyone is just representing themselves in their bank account. Yet we keep this system going. History books are just going to marvel at this whole thing. I'm a free thinking dog. Oh, 9 says, no evil succeeds when good people do nothing, like writing votes. You willfully allow evil to win because your own pride. So when abortion is legalized by Dems, I just, again, no vote is going to stop abortion from being legalized in all 50 states. It's going to happen because that's just the trajectory. That's the foundation of this country. It's just rotten at the core. So voting doesn't fix that. Only thing that's ever would ever fix that, ever overturn that, is for people to be holy, for Christ to come truly reign. I just don't think we give enough credit or spend enough time with trying to do the right thing and the holy thing to fix worldly problems. So I Speaking about evil being in your bloodline, Marmon says, I need to check on this now with my doctor. I wonder if Medicare will approve it or will I have to pay for it out of pocket? Oh my gosh. And Paul's wrath, voting, entertainment, school system, all about keeping us in line. So we don't get serious about revolting against the evil. They do. Just a herd of entertain counts. Yeah. As long as we keep validating the system, this corrupt, evil system that's in place, that's rotten at its core, as long as we keep validating it every 4 years by voting, we're never going to revolt against it because we give it a license to exist by voting for it. So, um, but it's going to collapse eventually. It has to. It's too evil not to. And God's wrath is eventually going to come. That's just how it happens. So, but again, that's David O'Gray off Code Unscripted. Let me get out here. Love you guys for coming in. Thanks for hearing me out, and thanks for giving me a good grade. Those click that like box. I appreciate you, and I will see you on the next one on Monday. I got an interview um, with Kyle. He'll be on the show. Kyle Dean Gorlick. He'll be on the show. We'll be talking more about exorcism and some other things. So look forward to that. But I will see you in the next one. Until then, until next time, blessings and shalom to you and to yours. Remember, Jesus loves you and is there for you. Peace.